Hello everyone, I'm Joanna Penn. I'm here with Orna Ross for the Alliance of Independent Authors April Q&A session. Hi Orna.
Hi Joanna. Hi everyone.
And here we are again, and it's crazily, although it is April and supposedly spring, but it's actually been hailing here today.
Oh, in England the weather is just crazy.
It is. So we have a ton to get through today, so we will get straight into it with our updates. So Orna, an update from LBF, the Indie Fringe, and what else is going on?
Oh yeah, Indie Fringe. Well, LBF was interesting this year. I got a sense of it being quieter, generally a more subdued fair than last year. And for authors, I think the Author HQ has settled in. It was in a new area this year. Very nice. A little bit removed from everything else, which I think some of the authors were a bit disgruntled about, which I can understand. But, you know, we are indie. We are never going to be central to the business, even though we are listed on LBF Authors Central to the Business. Really, no, I don't think so. But it was a lovely area, lovely tables and chairs around it. I mean, at any other publishing fair, that sort of space you only get when you pay for it. So I think London continues to be the publishing fair that is best for authors. The Author HQ education, we always have problems from our members. You know, our members are always a little bit disappointed with it because it is really aimed at beginner authors, and obviously, of course, people who are also interested only in getting a trade publishing deal and not in self-publishing at all. So we did have our own session, which I think was aimed at people who know a bit more about self-publishing and you know, how to make money selling books and how to just generally enjoy life as an indie author. But in general, the education was a little bit more basic than that. So, but aside from that, I think all round it was a reasonably good offering. How was your fair?
Yeah, it was tiring. I had a whole load of meetings, and I think that's the number one thing. If any authors do go to the book fairs, the best thing to do is to try and set up meetings with people you want to meet, but also go and seek out the various you know, our publishing partners. So I had a really good meeting with Dan from Drafter Digital and Chris, the CEO there, and I talked to Apple, and I presented with Mark from Kobo. We actually did quite an advanced session on the business of writing, which was great actually. It was late in the day and I was on a bit of a rampage, so I actually really enjoyed it, and Mark's fantastic because he just rolls with it. So we had quite a good session, and I got to hold the new Amazon Kindle Oasis, which was pretty cool, and yeah, really interesting in that way. So I think it was good, but as you say, it was difficult. I think what was much better for authors was the Indie Author Fringe from the Alliance, which was, to be honest, you know, and I always say this to you, I was not expecting how many sessions there were. 24 sessions in 24 hours, of which the quality was very, very high, ranging from stuff for new authors to all the way up to, I did one on advanced kind of audio stuff, podcasting and audiobooks, which, let's face it, is quite advanced. It was great. I know you worked really hard, and David and Jay and everybody, so thank you so much for doing that. Is there anything you want to point out specifically for people on the Fringe?
Well, thank you for what you said, and thank you for your contribution, and thank you to all the speakers. It is, of course, their contributions that make the Fringe what it is, and it is the fact that they contribute their time, their energy and their effort and their knowledge and expertise free of charge, which allows us to keep it free for authors everywhere. So we were delighted with it this year as our first session of the year. It's the first of 3. It used to be 3 days in a row. Now it's going to be 3 days across the year, Fringe to London, BEA and Frankfurt. And it went really, really well. And the reason we do 24 hours, 24 sessions is we want to have a period where it is live for every indie who's a member of the Alliance or who wants to attend the fair, so that at some time, no matter where you live in the world, there's some current stuff going on. So our ambassadors and our members around the world were kind of manning the hot seat while we slept, and it's all very exciting. It's all a real tribute to the entire community, the way everybody just kind of comes in behind it and volunteers to help, and it's just great.
Yeah, and we should point out people can still find all of those sessions at the selfpublishingadvice.org, and go to the Indie Author Fringe link, and well worth. And these are not things that you had to be there live for. They you can listen to them, and you know, most of them are going to last a year or 2 years in terms of their current information. So people should still go there and check them out. I've still got a few on my list to listen to.
Yeah, no, there's some excellent sessions, and they'll be there at least until the end of the year. But then we were just finished London Book Fair, and we realized, oh dear, BEA is so close to London this year particularly. I mean, normally it's sort of 8 to 12 weeks apart. This year it's not, it's just over 4 weeks. So we came straight out of one, and we're now preparing for the next one, which would be Fringe to BEA. And we've already got some really interesting things lined up there, and we are actually taking over the You Publish You stage for a number of sessions on the Thursday of the Book Expo America. And we have a couple of conference sessions going on as well. So we will be audio recording those and bringing them to the Fringe, and then supplementing that with lots of other great information. So anybody who wasn't speaking at London is now jumping up to speak at BEA, and we will be unveiling the speakers now very shortly.
Wow, pretty amazing. And then while doing all of that stuff, you've also crazily been doing a website redesign, which I think we should talk about, because, and before you start, I want to say to everyone, thecreativepenn.com is on about my 4th redesign from when I started it in 2008. So this is a really normal thing that everybody will do. It's a bit like when you add a new cover onto a book, or you have to redesign as you change, as your brand changes, as you know, and also as the person who owns the website, we're the ones who get bored with it, because we're the ones who see it so often. So redesign is normal. So tell us what you're doing with your website, why you're making those changes, and anything other people can learn from a design process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't like my website for a long time, but it was sort of functional, and I think it was a measure of, I think, you know, how you feel about your website is very linked to how you feel about your books and where you're going and what you're doing. So you have these periods where you get it and you're flying and you're very productive, and then you have these periods where it's all a bit chaotic and confused. Now, you don't seem to have these periods, Miss Penn, but
I do all the time.
Well, not so visibly then, and not for as long as some of us. So for a long time, I have been sort of trying to balance the various different things that I do, which would be sort of the non-fiction author guides and the Alliance stuff in the Fringe, you know, all the stuff about self-publishing. Then my novels and poetry, which is, you know, kind of stories and poems, which is a different thing again. And then in the middle, there's kind of a third thing that I have been doing forever, but not so visibly, which is sort of this idea of expanding the creative beyond the writing desk into life, you know, so the creative process is something that can be applied to anything. And finally, it all made sense, and I knew what the balance was, and I got really, really excited. And even though it was completely the wrong time, because it wasn't in my plan whatsoever, and most of what I do isn't, most of the things I most enjoy doing are the things that aren't actually planned, I decided to kind of make a start with it. And then so we're working away on it, and I am really kind of happy that it's coming together. And I think also when you're doing a lot of outward focused work, it's really nice to also have something of your own that you're holding on to. So while there's a lot of teaching and education going on in ALLi, even more than usual, it's nice to be developing the site, and of course the books and everything that will flow from it. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the process, working with a wonderful designer and Pixby, an ALLi member, and it's good fun as well. I love design. Yeah, I do. I love the design part. My favorite part of book publishing is the cover, and my favorite part of anything technical is the design part. I love working with designers. Really, really enjoyable.
So people can find that at ornaross.com.
Knowing it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. But no, you did mention balance there, and I wrote it down because I struggle. I think everybody struggles with balance. Like I was saying to my husband, Jonathan, who has now kind of appeared as my husband after being a secret husband for so many years. He came to the book fair and came to Hawkesbury Upton, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this balance idea, sometimes the other things we do, like the publishing, sometimes the marketing and the blogging and the social media, that can actually feel like a day job. And I feel like my fiction is the thing that I always used to do when I had a day job. It would, you know, the stuff you do early in the morning, late at night, in between all the other stuff. And I was really struggling with feeling like that. But actually, I was reading some notes about Thriller Fest. I was reading, you know, a book by an artist about fear as an artist. And everybody says, you know, the life of a professional artist or creative, you have to have all that stuff, whether you're traditionally published or indie. There's a whole load of stuff that is not the creating of art. So website design is just one of those things.
I agree. And you know what I learned was that it's really an essential part, and that it makes the writing what it is. In other words, that you almost can't have one without the other. I think I've spoken on this show before about, you know, when I decided I was going to be a full-time writer, and that I never wrote less in my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I write every day somewhere in the, you know, I write first in the day, and then I will also try and get a writing session in later in the day. So when I do, because I know I only have that time, I do actually use the time. Whereas when I had the whole day, I used to find myself doing everything but. So, you know, our minds tell us that if we didn't have to do this terrible thing, we'd be writing wonderful prose or wonderful poetry. But actually, the reality is, because we have to do those things, we write better. And you can't write all the time anyway. It's not physically possible.
No, I agree. And I guess also I've noticed, well, the last few weeks, because I was in America at the Smarter Artist Summit, then I was at London Book Fair, then I had all this admin to catch up on because I was away, and I was getting really, really, really grumpy, like super grumpy. And what's so funny is the question that everybody asks is, you know, how do you balance your writing with everything else? And my answer is now, because if you don't, like, you as a creative, you will get to this grumpy point where you basically hate your life and you think everything's wrong. Actually, all you need to do is spend a couple of, you know, do some writing. And the last 2 days I completely blocked out, and I feel so much happier because I've actually been writing this book on the author mindset, which I've actually been talking about for nearly 2 years. And I'm finally getting the words on the page. So I think my advice to everyone is, you will know if you're out of balance. That kind of urge to write so you're happy again is really important.
Absolutely. And waiting for the perfect conditions, I think it's really important to say that they just don't happen. You've got to just mark out the time and space and watch the words mount up on the page.
Good. So as usual, we do this bit of an update, but we've both got a few things. So I wanted to say that my latest book, Destroyer of Worlds, launched last week. And I wanted to remind everyone again, because people go, oh, congratulations, you know, and everything. And I'm kind of at this point where the book launch doesn't mean very much, which might sound really terrible, but I move on so fast. I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's done. Next. And what's great for indies is, well, I say it's great. No one should expect to make stacks and stacks of cash on the first week of launch. That's not how indies, the indie business model works. The business model for indies is long-term, lower level of sales for the long term. The traditional publishing model is spike, launch, disappear off the face of the earth. Whereas we are, you know, we go on at a lower level. So I just wanted to remind people of that and kind of say, for me, you know, the launch it's great to go up the charts a bit, to have some books out. I'm really pleased. But the main thing is focusing on the long term and writing another book.
Yeah, I think you're making a really, really good point about the way we live in the long tail, if you like, or I used to say we're like Bob Dylan, we're on the never ending tour. You can actually decide what book you're going to pick up and promote at a particular time. And I think there's a deeper thing going on here as well, which is that publication is no longer what it was. You know, there was a time where the book was published and that was that. I'm going to let the people who are listening now into a kind of a sneaky secret, and don't tell Amazon. I have been using Amazon pre-orders to put pressure on myself to actually get some work done. And I have been uploading books that are not quite ready, but going back in then and getting them. I haven't promoted them, so they're just there. So please don't buy them yet. But will be ready very shortly, because there's a lot of them, and you know what I'm doing in a late one affects an early one. I've just been playing around with them for so long. I needed this pressure to kind of say, okay, pre-order has to be in. Amazon will throw you off pre-orders for a year if you don't deliver. I'm really just purely using it for the deadline, because publication is no longer that kind of definitive defining moment where, okay, that's it now, it's gone out, there's nothing else you can do, you need to move on. And there are advantages to that and there are disadvantages to that, but that is what we're kind of living with. So it's very interesting and drives librarians crazy. But for authors, if you're, and particularly if kind of also I am, it's actually great, because my first thought is rarely my best thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been using pre-orders more as well. And I used pre-orders for Destroyer of Worlds, which is kind of almost like I'd already forgotten about it, because I uploaded all the finished pre-orders sort of beginning of April, and then it went live on the 21st of April, and it does enable you to get the print book done at the same time as the ebook launch, which I think is great. And I've gone hardcore and I've put up the pre-order for End of Days for December.
Wow.
Already for iBooks, Nook and Kobo. So and it's just a black cover with End of Days on it. And by putting out for December, my goal, and I'll state this now, my goal is to also have the audiobook done for the launch. So to actually have ebook, print and audiobook at the same time, which would be the first time I've ever done that. So
good for you. That's fantastic.
There should be enough time between now and December.
Let's hope so, if you stop doing all the other things you do. I want to just add into what I just said a minute ago, by the way. This is totally a case of don't do what I just said. I'm not recommending this in any way. It is not a good plan. But I think it's important for, you know, people look at other people and they think or assume, or you may read people's work or you don't know what's going on. You see titles coming out and you see this and that, and it always looks like everybody else is kind of doing it better, doing it faster, doing it, you know. I just wanted to say, you know, sometimes I do it really, really badly.
I'm always amazed, I'm always amazed at when things happen, whereas I plan like months and months in advance and get things done. Orna does things a bit later on, but still gets things done. So there are different ways of running this. There is no single way of doing this. It is all creative.
As long as you know sincerely that you're turning up and doing what you can do as best you can, there will be a lot of muddle and a lot of chaos along the way. That is the process, and not to allow that to derail you and to make you step off. I suppose that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm definitely not recommending that people should do what I have just done, but what I'm saying is it's getting me there. And so while it isn't ideal, and it certainly isn't recommended best practice or anything that ALLi would say anybody should do, it's good enough. It's getting it there, and it's in the context of a long life for these books. They'll be there in 2 or 3 years' time and beyond. I hope 10 years, 20 years' time. So if it's a little bit messy around the edges at the very beginning, but it actually makes them happen, then I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, couple more things. I wanted to say that I've been to loads of events, but two that stick out: the Smart Artist Summit, which was in Austin, Texas, run by the boys from the Self-Publishing Podcast, Johnny, Sean and Dave. Very good conference. It was 2 days and very laid back. You would have loved the venue, place called VUCA. Austin in general is like some weird, I guess it's like San Francisco in Texas, which is kind of strange. It's not Texan. It's quite a strange place, but really lovely, great community. And what was amazing, I spoke on the future of publishing, but a whole load of people spoke, but not just the people speaking. Pretty much everyone in the audience was doing very, very well. And people like Lindsay Baroka, who is an amazing fantasy author, doing incredibly well. She was in the audience. So I mean, it was one of these very high level indie conferences. And I think when people say, where is the conference for indies who have progressed and are running a business, it probably is going to be the Smarter Artist Summit. It will definitely be on next year. They've already put up the page, smarterartistsummit.com. So that would definitely be a professional indie author level conference where the discussion, even around the Coke machine, is at quite a high level. And then not on a hierarchical level at all, but I went to the Hawkesbury Upton Literary Festival, which was local here near Bath, in the Cotswolds, run by the wonderful Debbie Young, who is the editor on the Alliance blog, and amazingly well-connected lady, Debbie. Pretty much everyone there was a friend of Debbie and speaking because she asked, so really impressed. But what impressed me about that festival was the very definition of amateur, which is not derogatory. It means somebody who loves something so much that they're doing it for the love of it. So I went to the poetry sessions. There was a lovely panel on writing as difference. So there was a lovely handicap girl. There were Asperger's, bipolar, autism, really brilliant to kind of hear these different voices. And I just thought it was a great festival and really showed me why, these two festivals to me were the two ends of indie, not in any value judgment way.
The two pinnacles, really, you could say. The two, yeah, I know what you're saying.
We need both of them. And I felt very humbled by it. I was so impressed. I'm always impressed by people who read their poetry, but I was just like, wow, this is the core of indie. It's the people who are doing it for the love of it, the people who are making their own book covers, who some people would say are not professional enough, but who cares? They're doing it because they love it. And one guy had this book called 50 Shades of Yarg, which is a cheese. And I was just like, that is awesome. And just the whole thing to me was the essence of that word amateur, the love of creativity. So those are the two events.
I couldn't make Hawkesbury Upton this year. It's on the same night as my husband's birthday, as it happens. So I've told Debbie that reluctantly I can only go every second year, but I was there last year and it is amazing. And I would like to take the opportunity to just do a sing out for Debbie Young in every way and all she manages to do. But, the Hawkesbury Upton Festival is her to a T, and it brings so much together in such a wonderful way. And, it's a tribute to her energy and her dedication. And I completely and utterly, sorry, a call coming through there. Completely admire the way in which it is put together. And I know exactly what you mean about the two pinnacles of indie, because sales and all of that gets so much attention, and people who are managing to make a living through their writing, of course that is an incredible achievement and we all admire it, but this is also an incredible achievement. And I know one of the great joys for Debbie is bringing in fledgling writers who maybe haven't even got around to publishing as yet, and slowly bringing them and seeing their confidence grow through being involved and through meeting other indies and seeing what's possible. And I know step on step, some of those people who are completely seeing themselves as amateur one year may well be seeing themselves as professional also, but even if they are not, that's not the point. I completely agree. It's gorgeous, and there are loads of these festivals now springing up all over the world, and they're an absolute joy. So if you have one near you, make sure you do.
Yeah, go along and embrace it with all of that, the spirit for which it is. It's not meant to be London Book Fair. It's it's not meant to be whatever, some posh fest, hey on why. This is what's so nice. Anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I'll be putting a video of it on my blog this week with a little report. Okay, we're really going on a bit tonight.
Time for questions.
Yeah, time for questions. I'm hearing an echo. Are you hearing my echo or not?
I'm hearing like a clicking sound against your microphone. It's like something.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit of an echo, but sorry. Okay, I'll stand back a bit. Okay. Right, first question is actually from me, because I've had a lot of emails recently. So although piracy happens, so piracy when people put our books on other sites like Pirate Bay, and people who actually download stuff like that, we're not that worried about that. It happens, that's life. The most pirated books, J.K. Rowling, whatever, we're not bothered. But what's been happening is more plagiarism, also piracy, but plagiarism where people have been taking copies of books from Amazon, it seems, or in some way, changing the cover, maybe the title, and republishing them. Obviously, this is a very tiny number of people, but I've had a ton of emails about it. Well, not a ton. I've had like 5 emails, which is quite significant, about one issue that's been happening recently, including genres that are not romance, so wider than something else. So the question here is, you've talked before about copyright being a passive right. Amazon are actually sending emails to authors saying, prove your copyright to this book when they're detecting plagiarism. I've actually had one myself this week, because I've published a notebook version of How to Make a Living with Your Writing. So the same book published twice, which triggered their plagiarism thing. So my question is, when Amazon asks for evidence of copyright, what should people do? Should they be paying for copyright registration? You know, how do we do this, and what are the other things people should be doing?
Great, it's a great question, and this whole thing raises all sorts of issues. So this is one of these questions to which there is no absolute right answer, but I think this is the best answer after many years of kind of looking at it from lots of different angles. And essentially, I think no. I know that in the US, people are big on registering your copyright. But the whole point of copyright is that when you publish, you automatically own the copyright as an author. So how you prove that it was yours is by the date of publication. So the person who published it first is the person who owns the copyright. And that is enough. And that is why when you see, you know, the little C with the circle around it, it always has the year. And in fact, on Amazon or wherever, it will have the month as well. It can be very easy to establish, in fact, the exact day that it was published. So that is enough. And, you know, the idea that you register it, yeah, you know, it's another safeguard, but it's not going to give you one bit more protection if you have to stand up in a court of law and argue that you have been plagiarized, which, to be honest, is almost never, ever, ever, ever going to happen to an ordinary indie. I can't imagine any circumstances in which an indie author is going to have to stand up in court and actually, you know, take somebody to court for being plagiarized. Or
yeah, it's not in court. The question is, you're getting an email from Amazon which says you need to prove your ownership. Yeah. And you published the book on Amazon, so they have the date of publication.
No, but you just write back and say the date of publication was such and such, and you know, what is the date of the other publication to which you're referring. So it is really that simple.
Yeah, I would also say that I sent them the link on my website. So this one was thecreativepenn.com/make-a-living, which clearly had information about the book on, you know, they're essentially trying to prove who's the scammer in the situation. So if you have a website with your author name on, I know some romance authors are struggling because they might have multiple pen names. Yeah. So, and they might not have a website for that pen name. So I've seen some issues there. But also wanted to point out that you can email copyright@amazon.com. And they actually have a procedure on Amazon KDP for this. Now, we don't want to make people worried because, as I said, I've had an email. I just replied with the link on my website and they said, that's fine. So we don't want to worry anyone, but that it's just kind of a good thing, because it means Amazon really is trying to stop the plagiarism. So that's why these notices are being triggered, and that's basically how you deal with it. So is that everything?
And any supporting evidence, you know, if there is any doubt, your notes, you know, anything you might have that will actually support the fact that you are the author. If you are the author, you've got absolutely nothing to worry about.
Exactly.
The person who has something to worry about is the plagiarist. And, you know, it's such a horrible thing to do. And it really is. Especially this very deliberate sort of changing of names and, you know, changing the cover. And it's such a deliberate act. It's really, they deserve the wrath of Amazon coming down on top of them. Yeah.
What I would also say is, part of my talk I did on the future of publishing is I said we're in this really odd place right now in terms of technology, where Amazon has machine learning, we have fledgling AI, we have systems that are going to make discovery easy, plagiarism hard, and fake reviews impossible. And I think it will be a couple more years, but then all the stuff we do now, like type in 7 keywords, stuff like that, we're just not going to be doing things the way like blunt force things. Amazon is trying to fix this, so are Kobo, so are all these other people. This will change. We're just in this toddler years of smart. As content grows, people are responding to these issues. So my feeling is that in a couple of years, we'll look back and go, what the hell?
Remember when we used to do that? Yeah.
Remember when we used to read paper? Sorry. Okay, questions. Janet says, I remember when Joanna discounted the first ebook in her series to 99 cents. She got a lot of feedback, pro and con, which, okay, interesting. Now it's down to 0. With the wisdom of hindsight, were these the right moves at the right time? Yeah, okay, so this is my book, Stone of Fire, which is the first in an 8-book series, the Arcane series. Okay, so when I first published that book in 2011, I published it at 99 cents because in 2011, that was the prevailing wisdom, the Conrath, Hocking, John Locke wisdom of the time, which was to get noticed, 99 cents was a good price. And it wasn't free at the time. Free wasn't such a big deal back then. 99 cents was a big deal. So I was a brand new fiction author with 1 book. Who am I to charge any more than 99 cents for a start? Because no one had ever heard of me. So I was happy with that. The reason it's now free is when you've got an 8-book series, putting the first book for free is one of the best marketing tactics you can do, because it means people, it's like you go into a supermarket and you go to the cheddar counter and you're going to buy your normal cheddar and they say, hey, try a bit of this blue Shropshire cheese for free, and you try the blue Shropshire and it's lovely, and then you buy the whole pack. That's exactly what we're doing with free books. It's try this flavor of fiction, and if you like it, you might go on and buy the next book. So permanently free first in series is an established marketing technique that pretty much anyone with a series of more than 3 books is using. It's recommended by Kobo, certainly by iBooks, who merchandise both of those things, by Nook. Amazon doesn't allow for it, but they price match. So yes, I'm very happy with those decisions, and a free first in series is quite normal in genre fiction. What's your opinion, Orna?
Oh yeah, you know, I always kind of distinguish between what is a flavor of the month sort of promotional tactic and what is a very sensible strategy under any conditions. And free, if you have a series of books, anything over 3 or 4, making the first one free, it just is, I would say, a no-brainer, because if somebody likes it, they're going to go on. If somebody doesn't like it, they weren't going to buy anyway. So, you know, why not?
Yeah, and of course, it's very, very hard if you only have 1 book or 2 books or even 3 books. But once you've got, I've got 12 novels now, it becomes less hard. So if you're struggling with that, don't worry, just write some more books, and then once you've got some more books, you won't feel so emotionally attached to making one of them free. It's amazing how that wears off. Okay, just finding a good one for, oh, here you go, Orna. Anthony asks, what is the most important detail to keep in mind when selecting a self-publishing service?
Transparency. I guess, you know, if I have to pick one, there are 12 different things that we would look at and evaluate and when looking at a service. And of course, a service can mean anything from a go-it-alone freelance editor to Amazon KDP and everything in between. So it's impossible to say just one thing across the board, except I think that when you go onto the website, it's very clear what is being offered, how much is being charged, including hidden costs, and that you can get easy answers to your questions. So anybody that tries to, you know, conceal their pricing or make it difficult for you to find out. Now, sometimes editors will find it difficult to say exactly how much their service is going to cost, but they still will have and should have, and you know, this is something we would require of all our partner members, that they have a pricing page where people get some sort of sense of what they're about. So I would say if you have to pick out one, it's transparency. And the other thing I would just say, so I cheat and answer two things. It's really important, if you are hiring somebody as a service and you are paying them, that you understand they are not the publisher, that you are the publisher and they are a service. And in fact, you can apply that thinking all the way around the track, all the way up to trade publishing. And I think it benefits authors to do that, to think of yourself as the creative director of the book, and anybody that you bring in is a service that you have decided to hire because you have, you know, that's where you want to put your money. Perhaps time is more important to you than money. I will say that on balance, all other things being equal, it is, you know, as I said, we talk about services being KDP, Kobo, Nook, people that you go to and independently sort of put your book together and they distribute your book and take them out into the marketplace. That is the way in which you will be most likely to get a return on your investment of time. Going through a publishing service, a full assisted service, which may deliver your covers and, you know, all the other ancillary bits for you, that is you are unlikely to make that money back. Just generally speaking, I can't think of anybody who's making any sort of significant money that is using a full-scale assisted publishing service. But money may not be your driver whatsoever. We have loads of ALLi members who are really, really happy with their service and who have no intention of changing and don't want to do all the DIY stuff themselves. So, yeah, that's sort of a long answer to a short question.
The Alliance has a book, doesn't it?
It does indeed. It's called, thank you, Joanna, it's called Choosing a Self-Publishing Service. Funny that. And it is, of course, free to members. Just go to the member zone where you can download your copy there from the dashboard, and it is available where all good books are sold for those who are not members.
There you go. And I recommend it 8 times a week. Linda asks, how is a locked PDF file of a novel created? I have to ask, Linda, why you're creating a locked PDF file. If you sell direct, I imagine it's because you're worried about piracy, and some feelings on that are any pirate can break any kind of locked PDF, so why bother in the first place? You can get watermarks and things if you want to sell a PDF. Sites like Sells, SELZ and Gumroad and all that can actually put like an owner stamp onto a PDF if you sell direct. But in general, you won't, the only PDFs that we sell as we upload them to CreateSpace or Ingram Spark for print files, but we actually sell other file formats for the other stores. So I've gone back to selling direct. We were going to mention this earlier, I'll mention it now, and I use Selz, selz.com, and in my packet, if people say they buy How to Market a Book, they actually get the EPUB, the Mobi, and the PDF as part of their package, and I don't lock or watermark. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a fan of Cory Doctorow, who is anti-DRM, digital rights management, and basically says trust your reader, and so that they can read it on any device they want, because they should be able to read it on their phone, their iPad, their Samsung, their Google, Android, whatever they want. So if you lock it, you're locking down what the customer can use it for. And I think there needs to be more trust there. And yeah, that's my opinion. Orna?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's part of the creative economy, if you like. It's a change. So I think the idea of locking DRM protection, kind of, here's our words and that's the value that's put on them, and we sell X number of copies of them and out they go. That is a very conventional, way of thinking about it. And because now indie authors are creative people, and because the creative economy is exploding with all the ways in which people can do things, the maker movement and DIY, it's a much more fluid thing. And what you're building, when you get sort of all tight about it and you're trying to hold things on and you're not facilitating your reader, you're not putting the reader first, you're putting yourself first, and you think you're protecting yourself, you're actually closing off something, I think, that is a sort of a flow that's happening. It's very difficult to sort of say, I do A and then B results and that leads to C. It doesn't quite go like that. It's much more fluid and much more chaotic and, more creative and more a little bit crazy. So it's trust, as Joanna said, the reader, trust the process, that if you are writing well and delivering to your reader and in service to your reader, so essentially saying, well, you're the boss, and whatever way you want to read it, I'm going to provide it. And whatever, to some degree, I mean, obviously you don't write just to please readers, and that's not what I'm talking about here, but, that you see yourself as being in service to your reader, and that you're kind of open about it, and you trust the process, and you put your work out there. Most authors do not have to worry about protecting their work. They have a completely different challenge, and that is, how am I going to get people to know I exist? How am I going to get people to recognize my books? How am I going to get anyone to read them? And, this is why free exists, and this is why so many other things that are happening now in this space are happening, because discoverability, as they call it in publishing, is the biggest challenge. Not somebody might take my words and put them out there.
And because we now have to speed up a bit, I will riff off your discoverability into the next question, which is, what is the best way to set my historical romance apart? Kate asks. Published by Avon in 1987. I guess it doesn't matter if it's historical romance, it won't date anyway. So what is the best way to set my historical romance apart? Orna.
Get it some attention, I guess, is what I'd love to know the background to that question. Is it, so published in 1987, it was obviously a trade deal. Have the rights reverted,
let me do the second part then.
Okay.
I presume this is the same book. It's also Kate, so it was two separate questions, but it might be the same thing, which is, my romance is set in 1300. 13th century England and Wales, with the title Defy the Wind. I'm considering changing the title to A.B. Owen's Daughter, as being different and more catchy. Any thoughts on this title change? So I think this is obviously an author who has got their rights back, is considering changing the title, or how else can she set her book apart?
Okay, so I mean, we're back to basics. We're back to a number of things, which would be, the core marketing things. So you're right to be thinking about your title. I'm not sure that title, that the second title, the daughter title, is the one you should go for. There have been so many daughters, Gravedigger's Daughters, and
I like Defy the Wind. Defy the Wind sounds great.
I like Defy the Winds, unless what Kate is saying is that she feels, there are lots of books about the wind around in her genre. So the thing to do is go and look, see what is actually selling in your genre, and see what sort of titles are there, see what sort of covers are there. Standing out is good, but only to a certain degree. So you don't want to stand out too much. It's really important that your book screams out, that it is historical romance, that it is 1300, and roughly what kind of historical romance it is, because there are all sorts of layers of historical romance, as there are all sorts of layers of all the genres. So first of all, clearly establish the genre, so don't stand out too much, and then be eye-catching in your cover, be eye-catching in your title, and be eye-catching and category and keyword specific in your descriptions. So they're all the basics that you do. And then after that, it's extremely difficult to make one book stand out. So if this is your only book, and you haven't written another book since 1987, that's your first task, is to write another book.
Yeah, and I would say that if any book that's been around, over 25 years, I would say probably needs a cover update. An author, I think, as soon as I hear his kind of historical romance, I think Philippa Gregory, the classic historical romance is the Headless Woman cover, and they evoke a certain sense. So I would definitely, as Orna said, be looking at the genre, the bestsellers, and I would get a new cover. It may even, I would probably read it again as well. I think it's funny, even though it's historical, there may be things that you want to update. There may be secondary characters you could riff off and create something that you could give away for free to get people into the book. So those are some ideas. I think, when we talk about getting noticed, the things that, the basics, as Orna mentioned, the title, the metadata, the description, the keywords, the cover, these are still the most important things. Like Facebook advertising is all very well, but it only works if you have all the basics sorted, and even then it might not work. So yeah, focus on getting those right. Okay, next question. Mark says, does iBooks really offer their ebook uploading software, iTunes Producer, only for Mac? If you're Windows, what are you supposed to do? Shouldn't ALLi kindly petition them to make an iTunes Producer for Windows? I will answer this one. All you have to do is use Draft2Digital. Draft2Digital.com. There is no way ALLi is going to be petitioning Apple to change their proprietary software.
I think you're overestimating our influence, alas.
But if you use Draft2Digital, that would be my suggestion. And in fact, even if you have a Mac, that may be the way to go, because iTunes Producer and iTunes Connect are a bit of a pain in the proverbial. Okay, Martha. Oh no, Kate says, this might be a different Kate. If I've published a book with a distributor and I want to switch directly to Kobo Writing Life or iBooks, is that possible? Will my book lose all reviews? If I do I risk having a double listing or a downtime for the book?
This is one for you, I think.
Oh, okay. Okay, this is basically for Kobo Writing Life. You should probably email them, because they have a personable team who can help. Also, if you're going to, so what I'm actually doing is I'm going to move from Nook Press, so publishing direct to Nook, to Draft2Digital for Nook. I've been publishing on Draft2Digital for Nook for a year, but I have a whole load of other books that were published on Nook Press, and I find it a real pain to use. It's just really slow, and they're not going to support it for much longer anyway. Nook just seems to be
gone in the UK. It's now Sainsbury's.
Yeah, it's not. Things are not great with Nook. So anyway, I went to Draft2Digital and said, look, can I move my books across? And they said they have a way to keep the reviews on Nook. So again, if you want to use Draft2Digital for some of these things, I would say email the help team. But you're saying go direct. So if you're going direct to Kobo Writing Life, you may lose reviews or iBooks. But what I would say first is check, because both of those sites, Kobo and iBooks, have less of a reliance on reviews than Amazon. So I actually did this process. I went through to see all the reviews I had on various stores, and obviously the number on those stores are much lower than Amazon, just because the culture of the stores is different. So I would say, yes, you are likely to lose reviews and sales records, but you could talk to the help on those desks, and then secondly, does it really matter? Because it may be that if you have one review on a book and it's going to be easier to switch, then it's not that big a deal. You could even just you probably know, I mean, if you're someone with an email list, that the person who reviewed the book is possibly on your email list, so you can email them back, copy the review, email them, say, would you mind putting it back on this listing, whatever. So I think, yes, and I've done this type of thing, and it is a bit of a pain, but you have to be thinking long term. What do you want to maintain for the long term? And, it's like they say, when's the best time to plant a tree? It was like 20 years ago, or it's today. So getting set up for the longer term is a good idea, because then suddenly you have 20 books or 50 books and it becomes much harder to change things over time. Okay, one for you, Orna. Mary says, I'm having paperback copies of my first novel published by Matador. I didn't take their ebook package and would like to do a DIY approach. Once I have my typeset copy, I thought I'd try uploading it to Amazon and Kobo. Is it difficult? What format should I look to get my typeset copy into for EPUB? Would you advise me to release the ebook at the same time as the paper book? So basically, how do I get my typeset print copy into a format for Amazon and Kobo, and should they release at the same time?
Well, if you want to DIY it, which it sounds like you do, I can't really think of any way of doing that except cutting and pasting it into something like Scrivener, and then making up your own file, learning how to do that, and then compiling for Mobi and EPUB, which is a learning curve, which is worth doing, because it for your next book and beyond, you will save yourself a lot of money without a doubt. So that's one way. Or alternatively, you can give your text file to a formatter, but I'm assuming because you don't want to give it to Matador, that you don't want to give, perhaps you've reached the limit of your budget or whatever. I can't think of any other way to do it. Do you know any way to convert a lot PDF?
I mean, it may be that you want to keep the publishing to yourself. It may be that you can ask Matador for a format that you can upload, but then you upload it yourself. I would certainly recommend doing it that way. Or I have a list of formatters, thecreativepenn.com/formatting. The Alliance has partner members. You can pay someone like $50 to $150 to format a book into a template, into the right format, if you don't want to do it yourself on Scrivener. But I like the way you want to do it yourself. I think that's exactly right, because of course, if you don't own the process and then you want to change things, and both of us can tell you will want to change things, then if it's in your control and you understand the basics of formatting, which is not really a big deal, it will be much more empowering for you.
Yeah, so I think, even though it would be a bit of a pain to cut and paste it into Scrivener, I think that learning process would serve you very well. On the matter of whether to
release at the same time,
bring them both, there's absolutely no need to do that. And in fact, you may be giving yourself a little bit of, if you want to do something around launch time, though there is no need to, as we were discussing earlier, but if you did, you would be giving yourself kind of 2 goals at that. So take your time. There is no rush here, and you can do it any way you want to. There is no actual way that's going to guarantee you'll get a better outcome. It's more about picking and choosing good ways to deliver your book to your reader than it is saying, oh, if I bring them both out together, I'll get more sales, and if I separate them, that's not necessarily true at all. No.
Up until very recently, I always did ebook first, then print, then audio.
And I think that's the general, I think that's what most people do. So an awful lot of indies will put out the ebook, get some money from that, do the slightly more expensive thing of a print book, and then when there is more of a budget there, again, do the very much more expensive thing of the audiobook.
Okay, a couple more questions on perma-free. Martha, if I've managed to have a perma-free book on Amazon, what happens when I have to make updates and hit publish again? Will my book go back to 99¢? Will I have to do all the provide price match links for Amazon, or will the book stay free? Okay, I've done this lots. Once they've price matched, it just stays free. So as long as it's still free everywhere else and you don't suddenly update on iBooks or Kobo or whatever, it will stay free. Even if you update the same file on Amazon and re-upload, it will stay free. So don't worry about that. Second question, Birgit says, I've been reading about how giving out free copies of your book can increase sales and reader awareness. I also hear that Amazon crawls the web looking for free versions of the books you sell and shuts down your sales if they find it. Is this true? What's an indie author to do? What are the ways we can share parts of our work without being penalized? Can you take that?
Yeah, if I'm hearing it correctly, no, it's not true. So essentially what tends to happen if you put your book free somewhere else is you may get an email from Amazon that says, you know, your book needs to be cheaper on Amazon than anywhere else, and to think. But very often what happens, if you actually let them know, they're going to price match. So if I've interpreted the question correctly, your worry doesn't pertain. You're fine.
I think you're fine. And also there's a lot of overly emotional reactions on some of the author discussion areas, boards.
Oh, yeah.
So often what is true for one person and they kind of explode about may not actually be the reality of the situation, or it may only be true in a specific situation that you don't know about. So generally think of authors as kind of the emotional overreaction of the internet. And generally most of this stuff is not a big deal. And even if something happens, you can get it sorted out, as we mentioned with the copyright thing earlier.
So don't assume, always test, always have your own relationship with your own distributor, your own provider. Don't assume that just because you've heard somebody saying something that it is actually true in your case.
Okay, so last question we've kind of romped through from Grace. Okay, so Grace it's a very, very long question, so I'm going to try and paraphrase. I'm only in the draft revision stage of my novel. I have a marketing background. I'm starting to think about marketing. I write women's fiction, romance. My stories feature Black women protagonists and a multicultural cast of characters. I'm going indie because of the history of traditional publishing, putting books with Black women protagonists only in the African American section of their stores. And I just wanted to stop here and point people to the interview with Tololope Popula, a Nigerian author, and we talked exactly about this stratification of the Black narrative and how you know, there are lots more Black voices coming out into the indie space, which is very exciting. So check out that podcast with Tololope. But Grace says, Black women readers love women's fiction, will find these books. I'm now trying to dig into the right categories and keywords. My questions are, how do I honor diversity in my novels with the covers and keywords and still appeal to a broader audience? I don't want to hide my character's race on my covers, and I shouldn't have to. Would going with a more women's fiction looking cover as opposed to a romance have more broader appeal? So the question is whether to put a Black or multicultural character on the cover. And then secondly, how do I choose categories that highlight multicultural but don't exclude a large chunk? So using African American might mean sort of going into a category where other people might not read it, which is kind of crazy. So what are your thoughts on this, Orna?
Well, it's the blunt instrument of publishing, isn't it? And of genre and categories, keywords, and so on. And I think you have a decision to make here in terms of balance, you know, as to, it's very difficult. I hear you. I mean, 100,000%, Grace. You shouldn't have to make these choices, but the reality is you probably are going to have to decide which is more important to you, that you honor the multicultural nature of what you're doing, or and perhaps take a hit or narrow your focus and narrow your audience for a while, or you, in a sense, not disappear it or anything, because that obviously is not something you would ever want to do, but that you don't highlight it, you don't make a big deal of it, and you basically treat it as the race of your protagonist and the multicultural nature of your of the character cast as ancillary and kind of by the way, and you just let it be what it is and don't highlight it.
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings on this too, because firstly, as a white woman, I have a black woman in one of my books. I have a multicultural guy, half Nigerian, half Swedish, big character. My psychic in the London Psychic series, he's pretty dominant. But as I put those books in mainstream, although my book trailers have mixed race characters on. James Patterson, his biggest series is Alex Cross, and the main character is African American. So there are certainly mainstream books in mainstream genres. That's thrillers, I know thrillers. So you could certainly go that way, but James Patterson's Alex Cross books don't have an African American on the cover. If you then look at African American romance category, there are black characters on the cover. There, it is a very defined look and feel. So as Orna said, you have to make the choice. Do you go the James Patterson route? Obviously, he's not black, so I don't know whether the race of the author has anything to do with it, but you will have to choose that route. Do you want to go mainstream, in which case don't make a big deal on the cover? Or do you want to use the marketing angle of African American? You may actually sell more books if you do go African American. I don't know, but there is a very clear niche, which is good. Clear niches are good, and having a very defined cover, you will target that specific market. So it is a really hard thing to do.
It's a great question, a really good question, a really interesting issues, and there's no right answer. And I suppose maybe something that might help is to think of it again, not in terms of one book. So it might be, you might settle in, where the book is most comfortable in its niche at first, and knowing that on book 3 or book 4 you're going to actually take it out of there and broaden your horizons. But there would be also great comfort for you in that niche, I think, and other writers who have had these kinds of issues and explore them, and you'll meet other writers and readers who love that kind of fiction. And I think for yourself as an author, just in terms of nurturing your own creative journey, it will probably be the easiest option for you, but it all depends on how much the political point matters to you.
Yeah, and also remember, as we've said before, you can change your cover. So if you go with a specific, either one or the other, and then you change your mind. I mean, I've changed my covers so many times, but I've just changed Desecration for the 3rd time, because I just didn't know what those books were until I'd written 3 of them. And after publishing the 3rd one, I was like, yeah, the first cover needs changing. So I changed the first cover again once I understood the whole movement of the trilogy. So, and I again did the first books after 3 years. I went back and changed them. So remember, you can change stuff. And you can change the titles if you want. This is the happy stance of an indie. So whichever way you go, it's not set in stone.
Great place to finish.
Yeah, great place to finish. And okay, so we will see you at the end of May. So we've got the BEA Indie Author Fringe, Orna?
Yep. And really can't look up right or left until that is over. And
so that will be at indieauthorfringe.com again.
Indieauthorfringe.com, and yeah, it'll be all over. It's on the 15th of May, Saturday, the Saturday after BEA, which is in Chicago this year. But of course, we'll be beaming out all over the world, 24 sessions again, 24 hours. And if you haven't registered already, just go to indieauthorfringe.com and register there.
Fantastic. We'll see you next month. Happy creating, and we'll say bye for now.
Bye-bye.